work donuts. What are work donuts? Alright, let us watch. How long is this? I forget. Alright, oh, there it is. ANGRON Eater Worlds. Alright, we're gonna watch this. It's by Warrior Tier again. We watched the first 45 minutes. We're on the World Eaters arc. And then I think we'll be able to get to the Heresy and watch the Heresy. It looks like that maybe he gets the nails taken out later, maybe. Kind of too late to take them out now because they probably already are removed.
One of the last remaining legions without a Primarch. They watched with silent envy as the other Primarchs slowly began to surface, witnessing firsthand how the legions changed for the better as their respective gene fathers appeared. And then, the day finally came. After decades of waiting, their Primarch had arrived. The excitement was palpable. At last, their true commander was there to lead them, to shape their legion into one in his own image.
What do you want me to say? This is gonna get on YouTube. You're gonna scare YouTube. This is supposed to be a surprise for new viewers. Lock on, cut this part out. I still want this to be surprise for people that join the Twitch. I love you, Color. Alright, back to this.
The story of ANGRON being the only Primarch who had refused the order of the Emperor quickly spread. Knowing that ANGRON would rather have died with his army than join the Emperor's crusade only added to the Warhound's enthusiasm. What Primarch could better understand true brotherhood than the one who rejected the Emperor to stand with his brothers? Even after the death of Gear, the Warhounds were euphoric in their excitement and completely devoted to serving their gene father. ANGRON, on the other hand, was feeling much different than his new sons and struggled to accept his role of serving the Emperor. He quickly became acquainted with his legion and life outside of Nuceria. No longer was he leading a group of ravenous, ailing gladiators who were armed with only sticks and rocks. The meticulously trained, genetically enhanced Astartes of the World Eaters were killing machines on a level that ANGRON could have never imagined.
So basically, he went from level 1 soldiers to level 100, like, generals. This is like a player that's just played the beginning game, and then they go to their friend's house, and their friend is already beating the game and is playing with cheats. And they're like, massacring everything.
Killing machines that the Emperor had deployed to conquer worlds that were lost during Old Night. Karn had introduced ANGRON to the campaign of liberation known as the Great Crusade, and found himself toiling to overcome ANGRON's hesitancy to participate.
Let's
Again
learn.
with this compliance talk. I already told you, Khan. I don't understand it. I don't care about it. I don't know why you insist on living as a slave.
Sire, I feel as if there is a misunderstanding. We embark on campaigns to bring worlds into compliance with the Imperial truth. Worlds where Xenos dwell, creatures from the warp. Worlds where humans have been led astray and have not accepted the rule of the Imperium.
Rule of the Imperium. This Emperor is just another High Rider, keeping humanity in shackles unless they comply with his word. I want nothing to do with this.
With all due respect, sire, I believe you are mistaken.
That's the
Compliance
war table in
campaigns don't
Darktide.
enslave worlds, they free them. Bringing a world into the Imperium doesn't keep people in shackles, it breaks them.
And what if a world refuses to join the Imperium?
Then we take the necessary actions to ensure they comply.
Why are you speaking in riddles, Khan? Tell me of these necessary actions.
We assault those who reject the Imperium, sire. We strike the planet, attacking it from our ships. We invade the planet and engage in battle on the ground. Oftentimes, worlds willingly join the Imperium, and there is no need to strike. But this is not always the case.
The nails were pounding in Angron's head. The thought of doing anything to support the Emperor was an idea that Angron loathed. But he was suffering from the relentless agony brought on by the Butcher's nails. And he started to think of the bloodshed that the Emperor's compliance would bring. Bloodshed that could soothe the pain from the nails.
Tell me, Khan.
Hi, Kelsey.
How long are these compliance campaigns?
A campaign continues until the world willingly joins, or until it is completely liberated. The length of time differs in each campaign.
Angron paused for a long moment before he replied to Khan.
31 hours.
I'm sorry, sire?
31 hours was all we needed in Deshea to defeat the High Riders. No explosives, no bolters, no ship bombardments. We fought with rocks. We fought with our bare hands. The World Eaters will have 31 hours to bring a world to compliance.
Angron.
Basically, what Angron is saying is, we took 31 hours with just stones and bare hands. You will not have longer than 31 hours.
What you accomplished on New Syria is remarkable, but I'm not sure 31 hours is enough time to take an entire world. Some worlds, perhaps, but others...
If tens of thousands of warriors such as you, with powerful weaponry and armor, cannot take a world in 31 hours, then they don't deserve to stand on the battlefield. No excuses. If I am to lead them, there will be no other way.
By your word, Angron.
And so,
Basically, he said it's my way or the highway, buddy. I will say this. I do love that it seems even with the nails.
This is why Angron is my favorite Primarch and Hose Legion is my favorite.
I feel like even without the nails, he'd have this kind of standard. He'd be like, I fought with stones and this and took on an entire, country and did it in 31 hours. You have massive technology and, thousands times what I had. You should take the planet in 31. Don't care how big the planet is. 50 times bigger? Doesn't matter. 50 times more populated? Doesn't matter.
began the rebirth of the Warhounds. Re-emerging under Angron's
I feel like
leadership.
he would still have that mentality even without the nails. It just feels like something that's ingrained in him because of how he fought. I just love how bad my camera's being. Give me a sec.
Most of Primarch has that metal.
Well, I assumed... I get the feeling that all Primarchs would have that mentality of, hey, I did this in this time. We have way more stuff. Why are we not doing it in this time? It feels very... I did it with this. You'll do it with this.
As the World Eaters. The Legion's participation in the Great Crusade was more rooted in Angron's needs than the Emperor's. And as the Great Crusade carried on, this word took on an entirely new meaning. Compliance. A compliance campaign now meant killing every last soul on the world that was being invaded in less than 31 hours. If this was not completed, Angron would enforce a new mandate. Decimation.
So what I'm getting is the Warhounds are the most brutal of the groups. You either comply, you either accept the rule, or your life is over in 31 hours. Maximum. Not minimum.
Angron sought to root out the weakness of his new legion, and failure to meet Angron's standard did just that. Each time the World Eaters failed to take a world within 31 hours, 1 out of every 10 in the Legion was to be killed.
No, there are 2 others that are worse.
Wait. How does he decide which one of the 10? Does he do the killing himself?
The consequences of decimation were substantial, and the unease of facing it started to loom over the World Eaters like a dark
Way
cloud.
worse.
Over the next number of years, the Legion transformed itself under Angron's leadership. As the Warhounds became the World Eaters, and the flagship Adamant Resolve became the Conqueror, the once honorable and strategic compliance campaigns of the Warhounds devolved into ruthless bouts of slaughter. The World Eaters continued to change, and their image and reputation in the eyes of the other Astartes legions also began to shift. As the Great Crusade continued on, even some within the World Eaters began to quietly question their new direction. The dreams of serving under a tactical genius like Rabute Gilliman, or a heroic warrior like Sanguinius, slowly started to wash away. The World Eaters couldn't truly understand the pain that Angron felt from his genetic implants, but they saw how they affected him. When they were engaged in battle, Angron was a force to be reckoned with. The nails turned this already fierce, unstoppable warrior into a complete embodiment of war. He was impossible to contain, slicing and tearing through every enemy that dared to stand in.
He has a chainsaw axe. One would question the need, but it is pretty metal. I will say that. I very much I do question the back of the axe. Why isn't the back of the axe just like a hammer or something? Why is it gotta be... I feel like it's decorative. It doesn't feel like it's... I mean, like, this part could be like a stabbing. But this is already there. You already have a stabbing implement. Why not make this a smashing implement? You have a slice, you have a stab, why not make this bludgeoning? To just like have
his way.
All of the...
It was when the Legion wasn't in battle that proved to be problematic. Angron was impatient, short-tempered, and completely devoid of empathy. He would fly into fits of rage out of nowhere, smashing servitors to mere fragments of circuitry and leaving gaping holes in the corridors of the Conqueror. Many world leaders had gone years without Angron ever acknowledging their existence.
He gets something better? Well, I'm assuming when he becomes like a demon prince, he gets some godly implementation of brutality.
As their Primarch would frequently stalk past them without even making eye contact. The World Eaters continued taking worlds in the name of compliance, but they frequently failed to do so in less than 31 hours. Then, during one particular compliance, something happened that changed the fate of the World Eaters forever. Angron had vanished.
Wait, he vanished. So did one of the demons just spirit him away?
Karn had ordered every officer aboard every ship to search for Angron, but each report came back the same. Angron was nowhere to be found. After comparing the results of a deep Auspex scan to the inventory World Eater ships, it was discovered that one was missing. Descending Edge. Not wanting to derail the current campaign, Karn left it in the hands of his trusted officers and set out with a small team to find Angron. Karn combed through the galaxy for 2 years in search of his Primarch. Although he would never admit it, Karn began to lose hope. After years upon years of waiting for his Primarch to surface.
Like, this is kind of weird. They waited for him to surface because he was like one of the last ones to be found, I guess? He just suddenly disappears in the middle of them doing this stuff.
He finally did, only to disappear without a trace shortly after taking command of the Legion. Karn swore that he would either return of Angron, or he would not return at all. He was prepared to spend the rest of his life searching for him. But then, the ship crew spotted something in orbit, floating silently above a dark world. Something that resembled the long-missing descending edge.
Why do I feel like either he was spirited away, or he went to a planet by himself to conquer it? Because he was tired of...
Karn didn't need to step foot on the ship to know what he would find. Or more specifically, what he wouldn't find. The small escort ship was gone too long and too far away from feasible resupply points to have any survivors on board. As the officers who journeyed through the stars of Karn boarded Descending Edge, Karn made planetfall to the world below to search for his Primarch. Unbeknownst to Angron, Karn had Mars-forged transponders installed within his power armor. As time went on and Angron's behavior became more unpredictable, Karn correctly assumed something like this may happen.
I'm trying to think if that's a good idea. Like, one would argue that it's not, but also, like, I get why he would do it.
And while they weren't designed for long-range tracking, Karn knew that if Angron was on-world, he would now be close enough to locate him. He cut through thick jungles and a seemingly endless amount of trees, following a path that had been created. As he followed, his auspex indicated that Angron was nearby. He walked for 6 hours, and as the sun set above him, he stood at the entrance to a massive cave. Karn's auspex beeped again, telling him what he already knew. Angron was here. He entered the cave.
I bet you anything there's like smash streets next to it or something. He's like, yeah, he's here. You don't need to tell me.
Walking slowly and looking thoroughly in every direction. After only a short time in the cave, Karn heard a low, deep voice bellow out from the darkness.
You found me, Karn.
Angron.
Karn, leave me alone.
Sire, you know I didn't come all this way to leave without you. We have spent 2 years searching for you.
I don't care, Karn.
Your sons are without their leader, Angron.
I don't have any sons. My sons died on Nuceria. Oh, they died without me. You, the Legion, the Crusade. None of this was my choice. None of this was my destiny. Your pathetic Emperor ripped my destiny from my hands when he put me on your ship and left my brothers and sisters to die. I don't want to hear about my sons, or what you or they or anyone needs from me.
I'm trying to think, but I feel like even if he didn't have the nails in him, I feel like he'd be very vindictive about that. So, like, I feel like really he kind of ignores the nails to a point. I feel like all the nails really do at this point is just keep him from being empathetic. He's like, how could I be empathetic when I'm constantly feeling an unimaginable pain and no one else is?
I was finally free. Finally in charge of my own destiny. And in the blink of an eye, it was all gone. You may call me your father, your sire, your Primarch, but I'm just another slave to the High Rider Emperor, living out his destiny.
It pained Karn to hear this, but he understood. From the moment Angron landed on Nuceria, he had not been in control of his own fate.
And what will you do here? Hide in this cave forever?
I'll die. I'll stalk this world until something kills me, the way I should have been killed on Nuceria.
I acknowledge your pain.
You can never understand my pain. Ah! They never.
Like, my only question here, I don't know if they ever explain it, but I feel like they should have the technology, or because they talk about all these like crazy implementations they're able to do. They should be able to at least lessen the pain from these things.
But stop! Ah! There is no peace!
Come back, ANGRON. We can continue fighting in the crusade, and the pain will subside.
No! None of you are strong enough! Ah! The campaigns have been riddled with failure, Khan! You are all focused on the wrong things! When I look at you, your brothers, I don't see warriors. There is too much talking, too much planning, too much diplomacy.
Then we can learn from you, ANGRON. You can train us.
No, I can't! Ah! You could never do what I do in battle. You don't feel the pain of the nails. You don't hear them sing as you fight, pushing you to butcher your enemy. You don't have the butcher's nails, Khan.
Khan looked into Angron's eyes and stepped closer.
But what if we did?
Oh no. Like, I understand wanting to like help someone through pain by like helping them experiencing it with them. But from what I understand of these nails, that's probably not the best idea.
He may have been fighting the Emperor's crusade, and he wasn't leading his true brothers, the ones who died alone on Nuceria. But for the first time in decades, Angron felt invigorated. This is what was missing. The Butcher's nails were the missing link, the link that would finally build the bond of Angron and his World Eaters. He had ordered Galen Surlak, a seasoned World Eater's apothecary, to replicate the Butcher's nails for mass production. And he made it known to the World Eaters that when they were able to produce them, he expected everyone in the Legion to undergo the surgery. Many of the World Eaters shared Angron's enthusiasm for the Butcher's nails. They believed that if they were to receive the implants, they would finally be able to relate to their Gene Father. They would only concentrate on what mattered. They were supposed to be the weapon of the Emperor. Leave the statesmanship and world building to the Ultramarines. Leave the care and compassion to the Salamanders.
I love that the dragons are the care and compassion of the 40k universe.
The World Eaters would be the bloody axe of the Imperium. Surlak was brilliant and proficient in everything that he did, but he was mystified by the Butcher's nails. The technology wasn't terribly different from other augmentations that he had seen, but getting it to interface with a living brain proved to be extremely challenging. And his attempts at duplicating the nails failed miserably. He made multiple attempts, but none of the World Eaters who were subjected to the surgery survived. The Great Crusade continued for years, and Galen continued tweaking his prototypes. He tried new methods of implantation, different incision points, but nothing worked. At the same time, the World Eaters continued to fail in bringing worlds to compliance in 31 hours, and as Angron's patience began to evaporate, their next campaign proved to be a tipping point. An Imperial world known as 9315
You really shouldn't use Earth as your... Come on.
had gone quiet, and Terra had not received any communication from it in many years. The call was sent out to investigate, and it was the World Eaters who answered. Following a brief investigation, the World Eaters determined that the humans on 9315 were killed. In their place, Xeno life forms masquerading as humans settled on the planet, referring to it as Genna. Upon being notified of the situation, Angron ordered the compliance campaign. Unlike other campaigns, however, Angron stayed on the ship and left the fighting to his legion. And the consequences that came from what happened on Genna are still being felt to this day.
Oh, I'm guessing he was very, very unhappy. How long did it take? 33 hours?
Thousands of World Eaters descended upon Genna and marched towards the city gates. Led by Centurion Majo, they were prepared to fight Xeno resistance, but they were surprised to find no enemies at all. Instead, the people of Genna walked towards the Astartes with their hands at their sides. They had no weapons, no shields, nothing. No emotion shone across their faces as they walked towards the World Eaters. The World Eaters were more confused than alarmed, but that would soon change. As the Gennans marched towards the 12th Legion Astartes, they quickly found themselves overwhelmed. They weren't attacking, but there were so many of them that the World Eaters started to get weighed down by their sheer numbers. Realizing that they were soon to be trampled by the millions of Gennans that were flooding the streets, they made a decision. And for one of the last times, a World Eater would utter these words. Centurion Majo spoke into his Vox unit.
For the Emperor, and for ANGRON.
The Astartes warriors began butchering the Gennans in the street, attacking them at will. Bolter fire, las rifle blasts, power spears.
I have a feeling the thing that'll never be repeated is for the Emperor.
They brought forth the full force of their arsenal. But it made no difference. There were millions of Gennans marching upon them, and there was nothing that they could do to slow them down.
Which is like terrifying to think about. That's gotta be millions upon millions upon millions. If like you killing them with very powerful weapons in mass is not stopping them from crushing you with them walking on you.
21 hours became 15. 15 became 1. And eventually, a tone sounded within the helmet of every Astartes on Genna's surface. Time was up. They had failed to take the world in 31 hours, and were once again faced with decimation. The World Eaters stood silently in front of their Primarch. No one dared to utter a word. The air in the hall was thick with nervous tension. ANGRON spoke, but it wasn't necessary. Everyone knew what was to come next. 1 out of every 10 World Eaters was to sacrifice their life for their failing. It was a formality that the World Eaters had become all too familiar with. But in a moment that left everyone in the hall utterly stunned, Centurion Majo stepped forward and spoke.
No.
The tension in the room was now suffocating. Everyone in attendance was in complete disbelief. ANGRON stepped closer to Majo and stared down at him with a fiery gaze.
What did you just say?
I mean no disrespect, Father, but we cannot do this. We have already suffered greatly on this crusade. We cannot continue killing our own.
ANGRON took another step towards Majo.
You're brave, Mago. Speaking your mind. Refusing your commander's orders. I doubt anyone else would have the courage to speak so freely.
ANGRON turned away from Majo and slowly walked away.
You and your warriors are responsible for this suffering you speak of. I will say it again.
I slept now.
1 in 10.
You sleep now? Good
Step
night.
forward.
You
Father.
slapping me?
We cannot.
You can go outside?
ANGRON kept his composure the first time Majo spoke,
Sorry, the
but he
puppy's
did not
looking
the
at me.
second time. ANGRON picked up his axe, Widowmaker, and stomped towards the neatly assembled World Eaters. The nails were screaming, and
I gotta
ANGRON
pause it right now. She is very mad at me right now. Alright, I'm gonna take her out. I'll be right back, and then we'll finish. I'll be right back.
A few moments later.
Why are you celebrating the dog interrupting it? Night-night, Doctor. Alright, we're back. Thank you.
swung Widowmaker in a perfect harmony with the nails. He was blind with rage and striking indiscriminately at anyone and everyone. Decimation was one thing, but Angron had lost control of his body. He was overcome by violent fury. The World Eater's librarians feared that Angron may kill everyone. They made a split-second decision to use their psychic abilities to stop Angron's rampage. By channeling a memory within Angron's mind, they hoped it could subdue him long enough to end his violent outburst. Memories of Angron's past flickered throughout his mind. A long-forgotten vision of a young Angron standing in the snow of the Deshayan Mountains was enough to end the slaughter. The World Eaters watched in horror as Angron fell to his knees and collapsed to the ground. Angron wasn't dead, but the psychic interference from the librarians had rendered him unconscious. With their Primarch in a psychic coma, the World Eaters were safe from Angron's rage. But the cracks within the Legion's foundation began to show themselves. The 12th Legion were never happy to fail their Primarch. But the fallout from this defeat was different. A divide was forming within the Legion. On one side, there were the Astartes that wanted the Butcher's Nails. They believed it would strengthen their Legion and allow them to become what they were supposed to be. On the other side, there were those who believed that the Butcher's Nails would spell doom for the World Eaters. They argued that if they were to become as mentally and emotionally unstable as Angron, that the Legion would completely collapse. Majo believed the nails were a curse. Khan believed they were a savior. And this was the primary topic of discussion as the two Astartes clanked their axes in the dueling pits of the Conqueror.
You are lucky to be alive, after challenging Angron the way you did.
This Legion is coming undone, Khan.
It's evolving.
Evolving? Into what, exactly? Thousands of us have been killed by our own blades, and all because a world wasn't taken in 31 hours?
It's what our Primarch demands, Mago. Who are we to question him? Every Legion has its difficulties, its quirks. Don't forget how long we went without a commander. Angron is laying the groundwork for the 12th.
We had a commander. And then he was murdered almost as soon as our Primarch arrived.
Gear was a placeholder. He wasn't a Primarch. Now I have no ill words to speak of Gear, but I don't think you're giving Angron enough time.
I'm concerned for the future of the 12th. We are slowly dying from these decimations, and now there's talk of giving us all the names.
I see both sides of the argument. Both sides of the argument have merit. I really like this writing. I'm definitely on Mago's side on the nails subject, at least. Just seeing what it does to Angron. I'm wondering why Angron doesn't think of removing the nails. Which I guess they don't know enough about the nails to remove them. Like, that's definitely, like, a possible modifier. And, like, there's gonna be bloodshed either way. You're right, chat. My only question I'm trying to, like, establish is what Angron truly wants. Are they letting the nails dictate everything they want? Or do they have, like, an actual goal in mind?
Nails.
Would you remove the
It isn't
last
talk.
part of all the
It will
people that
happen.
loved and trusted you, the ones that got killed?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. I didn't think of it that way. But, like, I'm trying to think what, like, does he view them as they are now very important? Or does he view the pain as very important? Because, like, he could keep the nails, but maybe, like, lessen the pain so that he can think clearly. But, like, if he views the nails and as they are now, absolutely important to the memory of his people, that's a hard question to answer.
They're getting closer to a prototype that can be implanted in all of us.
Then they should be rejected. By all of us. Look at what ANGRON did earlier today. Do you believe that we would benefit from being more like him?
I believe that we should have been victorious on Genna. I believe that if we had the nails, that so many of our brothers that you lament the loss of would still be here.
I'm not arguing that we wouldn't be powerful forces in battle, Khan. It's impossible not to admire what ANGRON does in combat. But there is a life outside of combat. And
okay, I see the argument Maga's going for is they won't always be fighting. He's trying to think of what's going to happen after the fighting. But in a world like this, I kind of feel like the Nails side kind of has a more legitimate claim. Because it doesn't look like the fighting's ending anytime soon. Even if they conquer worlds in 20 days, like... You'd literally... Like, I don't think you could even say that it would end quickly if they conquered worlds in, like, weeks. Like, less than, like, 3 or 4 weeks.
Will destroy that. Our reputation amongst the other legions would be tarnished.
We're not here to maintain a polished reputation. We're here to wage war. To be the sword of the Emperor. Whether we have the nails or not, our mission remains unchanged.
Like, yeah, like that was my view, is like, even without the nails, they still have to conquer the planets. Like, even without the nails, they still have to fight all these battles. And I kind of understand. I kind of agree with them that if they hadn't had the nails, Genna would have been easy. Because the second they started walking up to him, they would have started slaughtering. They wouldn't have waited and, like, been caught off guard. They would have started slaughtering.
Our Primarch believes that the nails will aid us in achieving that mission. And I agree with him.
With the nails, the only thing I see is an existence where we abandoned who we are and become something else. Physical incarnations of rage.
Which is kind of what they need to be, because they're supposed to be the ones that do the killing. From what I understand. All the other factions are, like, doing their own things. This faction is literally there to do the, like, fighting the planet until either they accept rule or not. Which usually ends to not, because, like, I'm assuming very, very rarely do planets just give up in the middle. So, like, kind of feel like Butcher's side has, like, I would say, like, an 80% reason to be right. Whereas the other side really only has, there's that 20% that's like, well, you make a point. There are other things outside of the battle, but all y'all ever are doing is fighting, so what do you mean?
And maybe, Mago, that is exactly what we should become.
Like, I would say this. There's a good reason to have, like, a few of your generals, like, upper generals, not have the nails. So that you have some people that do diplomatic missions with other groups. But very few of them are needed. Very few. Like, you need someone that will talk to you and give you the other side sometimes. You don't need them all the time in a group like this. But you do need, like, 1 or 2 people that will basically be your go-between. But, like, I would say 99.99% should probably just have the nails.
It had taken Galen Surlak years to get to this point, but he was finally on the verge of a breakthrough. After the failed compliance of Genna, Karn had brought Apothecary Surlak one of the Xeno corpses so he could study it. And after dissecting the body and inspecting it, he learned that the Genin corpse was not a Xeno after all. It was a machine. After running a series of tests, Surlak had determined that the Genins were wired to receive a signal, which meant that the millions of Genins were not marching upon the World Eaters by their own free will. They were being controlled remotely by human minds. Surlak's discovery prompted a hypothesis. If the Genins were not operating under their own control, and their actions were being dictated by human minds, was it possible that there could be a connection to the Butcher's Nails? With ANGRON still in his psychic coma, Surlak was able to study the Primarch's implants more closely than ever before. He spent the next several days poring over the data he had acquired, comparing the information obtained from the dead Genin's body to that of ANGRON's nails. The results were astonishing. The archaeotech utilized in ANGRON's implants was nearly identical to the Genin technology that Surlak had been studying. This was it. This was the discovery that he had been hoping for. The missing piece that can ensure his replication successfully interfaced with a living brain. He wasn't 100% certain yet, but if his theory was correct, if the Genin technology was in fact based on the same standard template construct of ANGRON's nails, then the code had been cracked. Surlak immediately went to work, carefully constructing his new duplicate nails to the specifications of the Genin technology. And after days with his head down, working in his lab, his prototype was finished. All that was left was to test them on a live subject. Surlak understood that there would be hesitancy amongst the Legion. Dozens of World Eaters had already died from previous versions of the nails, and there was no guarantee that it would be any different this time. He summoned the Legion to the Triumph Hall of the flagship.
It's basically going to be like, I have possibly the most perfect version of these things. He's going to let someone volunteer. I kind of feel like Karn's going to do it. If Karn is like being honest about his opinions, he would be the first one to step up to this.
Make this announcement. The Butcher's Nails had arrived. All that he needed was a volunteer. A voice in the crowd of the World Eaters spoke and walked through the gathering of Astartes. Surlak smiled as his volunteer stepped forward. Karn removed his helmet.
Yep.
And smiled back at Surlak. He was ready for the nails.
Because Karn feels like, at least right now, I don't know if like, because I know that there's supposedly a lot of traitors and stuff amongst all the legions. Because of how ironclad the rules are and stuff. He feels like the person probably closest to wanting to understand.
With Karn laying on an operating table in the apothecary's lab, a nervous excitement began to build up within Galen Surlak. He was surrounded by medical equipment and buzzing servitors. The surgery was almost complete. A casual eye would not be able to differentiate between ANGRON's nails and those that Karn was receiving. Sleek, silver cabling wrapped around the back of Karn's head and connected to the nails inside. As the last connection clicked into place, his eyes opened. He was disoriented, unaware of where he was. Beads of sweat formed at the top of his head, slowly dripping down his face. A voice was speaking in the background, but Karn couldn't make out the words. He looked down and saw his hand shackled to the table he was on. Whether it was pure coincidence or a divine event, I'm unsure anyone will ever know. But as the nails began to pulse in Karn's head for the first time, as he lost control of his emotions, ripping the shackles from the bed with terrifying force, ANGRON suddenly woke up. And this was the moment that the divide in the World Eaters deepened beyond repair. With a reliable production of the Butcher's Nails ready for implantation.
So, the image of the World Eaters is literally like a teeth surrounding a world. And I'm guessing the Warhounds, are they still a faction in the group or something?
The World
They
Eaters
just
on
don't
one
have
side
a
of the divide stood
Primarch?
ready, waiting for their opportunity to receive the gift of their Primarch, while those on the other side of the divide organized a coup. Centurion Majo understood that it was the technology from the dead Genins that led to the creation of the nails, and he believed that there could be more information on Genna, information that could lead to the removal of Angron's nails. If he could get there in time, it was possible that he could save his broken Primarch. The news of Angron's awakening and Karn's successful surgery spread across the World Eaters like wildfire. Majo knew he didn't have much time. He needed to make planetfall to Genna.
See, that's my question. Like, I'm guessing they never got the chance. They never get the chance.
But as he was soon to learn, it was too late.
I'm guessing if he had gone and looked for the cure before, while this was all going on, it might have been different.
The World Eaters had passed the point of no return. Angron and his new warriors were already on the ground. As more of the Genin machines poured into the streets, they were met with a violent death. Nearly 1,000 World Eaters, with silver cables dangling from the backs of their heads, rampaged the Genin machines. There was no discipline in sight, no plan of attack. The World Eaters, their heads freshly equipped with their new engines of madness, were berserkers. Angron.
This is basically... I bet you Galen Sark has, like, toned down versions of them so that he can still do his medical work. Because he's an apothecary. Unless they just don't use medical people. Which, like... Oh my god. But I think if they had done this... If he had actually searched before... Like, Mago's supposed to be smart, so, like, if he had been smart, he'd have gone down there long before.
Karn and Galen Surlak hunted down the humans that were controlling the Genin machines. And in a spire in the middle of the burning capital city, they found them. When they entered the spire, they found hundreds and hundreds of small machines. They were stacked on top of each other, and each one housed a human. Galen Surlak theorized that the humans on Genna had built these machines to keep themselves alive, and using the technology that was now responsible for mass production of the Butcher's nails, they controlled the proxy humans on the world. Angron looked around the room in disgust.
Kill them all. I don't want a single one of them to survive.
And with that order, Majo's hope of saving his Primarch died. Majo and his supporters walked down from the ramp of their gunship and stepped foot onto Genna. They couldn't believe their eyes. The World Eaters were unrecognizable, destroying everything in their path. He watched in disgust as one of his crazed brothers swung his sword over and over at a Genin corpse that was long dead. They headed into the city center and found it in shambles. Buildings were on fire. Dead Genins lined the blood-soaked city streets. And in the distance, Majo saw his Gene-Father standing outside of a crumbling spire. He slowly approached him and felt a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach as his eyes fell upon Karn. Cables from the nails now dangled from the back of his head. The bloodshed and destruction surrounding him was not a compliance campaign. It was a civil war. World Eaters with the nails were pummeling their brothers that rejected the implants, mercilessly slaughtering them and then searching for the next victim as they screamed into the air.
Karn, it didn't have to be this way.
Karn laughed, then turned his head to look into Majo's eyes.
It did have to be this way.
I love
There was never going to be another way.
There is no saving me. Angron, your Primarch, died before you even knew he existed. He died on Nuceria. All that's left is the murderer, the bloodthirsty killer that the High Riders created. I've heard enough of your voice, Meg.
Yeah, I feel like that was going to be his viewpoint. That makes sense. He's kind of like, I will forever be the murderer. Because that was the last time I knew them. I was thinking that might end up being his viewpoint. So he would never want the nails modified.
Go. So if you have any last words you want to say to your pathetic emperor, speak them now.
He never had a chance to reply. Karn's axe struck Majo at the neck, and as his lifeless body hit the ground, a new chapter of the World Eater's story began.
Alright, we're gonna watch the Horus Heresy, and then we will go on to view our...
After what is now referred to as the Second Compliance of Genna, the World Eaters were never the same. The Butcher's nails were being produced en masse, and those remaining that did not have the cybernetic implants wouldn't be without them for much longer. As the World Eaters continued on the Great Crusade, their compliances became more and more ruthless, and as Mago prophesied prior to his untimely death, the reputation of the World Eaters had indeed become tarnished. The constant decimations, the erratic behavior of the World Eaters after having been implanted with the Butcher's nails, attacks on Imperial allies during cooperative campaigns.
Yeah.
It was concerning behavior.
That was one of my issues I was thinking of. Why they would need some without the nails. To keep them separated.
And the other Primarchs became disgusted with Angron.
It's like when you have berserkers in an army. You need a place for the berserkers to be without the other people. Because berserkers are always battle ready. They have no calm factor. The reason why they're able to fight so well and so, like, constantly is because they don't leave the battle mentality. So, you mixing berserkers with regular soldiers is like the stupidest decision.
Leman Russ feared that Angron was spiraling out of control, and that he was taking his legion down with him. And in a bold act of intervention, Leman Russ confronted Angron about the continued atrocities the World Eaters...
Oh, is he from the... what do they call them? The War Wolves or something? Like the Silver Wolves?
...were committing. Some theorize that the Emperor ordered Russ to intervene, while others believe that Russ took the confrontation upon himself. Regardless of who made the decision, it came as quite the surprise to the Conqueror's bridge crew when their Auspex detected unusual warp activity. Surprise turned to alarm when the Auspex readouts confirmed that the activity was a ship emerging from the warp. The ship that was approaching them was the Hrankel, the Space Wolves' flagship. And it wasn't alone. It hadn't been long since the Genin city of Malkoya had been ravaged by Angron in the 12th. The city's wounds were still fresh. Blood and debris were still scattered throughout what remained of it. And in the fields just outside of the destroyed capital, Russ and Angron met, each flanked by their legions Astartes.
Brother, I can no longer sit idle while you destroy your own legion. Murdering your own sons in the name of decimation.
Murder. Eliminating the Legion's weakness is not murder. And who do you think you are to tell me what I should be doing? I don't take orders from you, Russ.
What you are doing is wrong. Compliance is one thing, Angron.
So wait, do they fight, and then which case... I kind of like the Space Wolves, I'm not gonna lie. I don't want their Primarch to just die.
But you are committing genocide. Slaughtering entire worlds of civilians who are attempting to surrender is not furthering the Emperor's cause. Your implants are fueling this lunacy, and it must be corrected. All of us, the World Eaters and the Space Wolves, are to return to Terra so that these implants could be removed.
That's what I was thinking. I bet you anything that this technology isn't, like, as crazy on Terra.
You act as if the Emperor himself hasn't ordered genocide. You all lie to yourselves and call it compliance? But is there a single world that you or I have liberated during this crusade that had a choice? Comply with the word of the Emperor or die? That is not a choice. That is slavery. But these are the Emperor's orders, brother.
You disgust me, ANGRON.
Go on your way, Russ. And know that you ever talk down to me with this unmerited dream of authority again, there will be consequences.
Both the Space Wolves and the World Eaters could sense that the situation was about to escalate, and the Primarchs could feel their tension. Leman Russ spoke through gritted teeth.
I'm leaving, but you're coming with us. We're closing the chapter on the Butcher's nails.
I'm going nowhere. You and your rabble of moon-howling cowards
I had a feeling they would make fun of them for having wolves as their symbol.
are less than an afterthought to me. You lead your legion, and I will lead mine. Why don't you make yourself useful and return to the Emperor's great enslavement crusade?
Your disloyalty is shameful, ANGRON.
You've spoken enough, Russ. Now you listen to me. You are no more loyal than I am. I have slaughtered countless innocent souls just like you. The only difference is that I do it in service to the nails, to ease the pain. I follow the Emperor's orders, Russ. But I don't do it under a false pretense of morality. Maybe, if I was as principled and righteous as you, I would have taken our bastard father's skull.
Leman Russ couldn't hold back any longer. He threw himself at ANGRON, swinging his chain blade with fury. The two Primarchs parried each other's vicious attacks. Russ was winding up to strike ANGRON, but he was overpowered by a blow from ANGRON's Widowmaker. As the two Primarchs stood across from each other, snarling in anger, their legions were suddenly attacking each other. Whether the first strike originated from the Space Wolves or the World Eaters is unknown, but it didn't take long for sheer chaos to ensue. The two legions erupted into violence around the dueling Primarchs. Russ was fully aware that he was outmatched in combat against ANGRON.
Like, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I'm pretty sure ANGRON would just be really... probably one of the strongest in terms of combat, because... obviously, they're like a berserker. They only know battle.
He was too strong, too fast. And ANGRON was so unhinged that he didn't care if he killed his own brother. He didn't pay any attention to what was going on around them. And that was the point that Leman Russ was attempting to make.
Do you understand, ANGRON? Look at what's happened to your sons.
As ANGRON took his eyes off his brother, he found himself surrounded by Space Wolves. In every direction, the sons of Russ had their bolters aimed directly at ANGRON. Past them, the World Eaters were still engaged in combat and were getting the better of the Space Wolves.
You should be more concerned about what's happening to your sons, Russ.
ANGRON, look at your sons! They're so deranged that they don't even realize that you're about to die.
Leman Russ was correct. At any moment, the Space Wolves surrounding ANGRON could rip through him with a storm of bolter fire.
They're too busy winning the battle to worry about that.
Leman Russ was trying to send ANGRON a message. He was trying to show him that the Butcher's nails weren't the advantage that he thought they were. That blind rage is actually a hindrance.
In northern battle, like Viking battle tactics, there's a reason they would set loose some of the berserkers on the battlefield. It was a battle tactic. They would sometimes win off the power of one berserker alone.
And as Leman Russ lay on the ground, bloodied and bruised from his brother. He realized what many others would soon come to see for themselves. Angron was slowly losing himself to the nails, abandoning what little remaining logic and reason he had left. Russ howled towards the sky, rallying his sons by his side, and they fled towards their Stormbirds. The World Eaters were so caught up in the nails-fueled bloodthirst that they didn't even realize the battle was over until the Space Wolves were gone. Angron laughed, believing himself victorious.
Like, obviously, yeah. I feel like he has a point, but, like, it's, like, very clear that the other side is not realizing that. I think my idea is better. I feel like a combination of the two ideas would have been working. Some of the, basically they could have made their more senior members their berserkers. That's what the Vikings did. Only a few berserkers would be released onto the battlefield. Usually with, like, just one sword and stuff like that.
Yes. And as the Rankel sailed into the stars, Leman Russ sat alone, coming to the sobering realization that Angron couldn't be saved.
Well, I feel like he probably could have been saved had they gotten this nails thing done when they found out about it. He might have been, like, more willing to at least lessen the pain he felt.
As fate would have it, Angron wasn't the only Primarch headed down a destructive path. Lorgar, Primarch of the Word-Bearers, was pushed towards the ruinous powers of the Dark Gods after being publicly humiliated by the Emperor and Rebute Gilliman. And following the events of Davin, Horus, the War Master and Primarch of the Luna Wolves, was also tempted by the powers of chaos. Lorgar used this opportunity to manipulate Horus, and the seeds of betrayal were sown. After the corruption of Horus, the War Master sought to overthrow the Emperor. And these traitorous ambitions gave birth to the Horus Heresy. As the heresy began to take shape, Horus was able to convince half of the other Primarchs to join his cause. There were some Primarchs that needed a fair amount of convincing. Angron was not one of them.
I feel like Angron would have been the one that was like, attack the High Rider Emperor? Yes.
It wasn't that Angron stood with Horus.
He wouldn't even have standed with him. He just, like, he hated the Emperor. He considered him a High Rider, so it makes sense.
It was that he hated the Emperor. And the heresy was the perfect opportunity to exact revenge on the man who left his brothers and sisters to die on Nuceria. On the planet of Isfahan III, Vardis Prawl, the corrupt Imperial governor, had suddenly raised his banner in rebellion of the Imperium. Ordered to prevent the uprising, Horus still appeared the dutiful son and called the Emperor's children, the Death Guard, and the World Eaters to his side. And though on the surface it appeared that Horus was fighting in service of the Emperor, he was actually preparing to fire the first shots of a monstrous and vile civil war. Thousands of loyal Astartes landed and set to work slaughtering those who had betrayed the Imperium, never knowing that the true betrayal had only just begun. Those on the ground at Isfahan had landed with the intent to honor their fathers. Their fathers repaid them with death in the form of virus bombs. For a number of World Eaters, even with their brains distorted from the butcher's nails, this was too far. They had been willing to abandon nearly all of their ideals, but they could not go as far as betraying the Emperor. Angron punished them for this refusal. Against the will of Horus, Angron landed 50 companies of World Eaters to kill his remaining loyalist sons. The World Eaters who had rejected the nails had been purged during the second compliance of Genna. The second purging of the World Eaters occurred on Isfahan III, when those that refused to betray the Imperium were murdered. And the last glimmer of hope for the World Eaters died in fire, along with the planet.
Yeah, figured as much. That's basically the nail, ironically, in the coffin of ever getting those nails out of his head. He probably loves the nails now. Definitely very interesting. Very interesting. Makes me want to know about the salamanders more. My children. Only my little fucking.
The good boys.
The good boys. My little good boys. Very interesting indeed. Quite interesting. Alright. I'm gonna let chat decide this.
Soon I will have all your heads! You should have checked I was dead! And I can still see their faces. Their trusting look led astray. Only blood can amend this.